Hromadske International, the only prime-time show explaining Eastern European geopolitical storm in English, and I am Natalia Humenyuk. Today we have a very busy day in Eastern Europe. We are still following live the protest in Russia with many people detained in Moscow, and we are going to the other towns. We are also looking in details to what is happening in Belarus, and we will have our colleagues talking to us live on Skype from Minsk to explain what's happening there. This week, a former Russian MP Voronenkov had been killed in the very center of Kyiv, and his former colleague, also former Russian member of parliament Ilya Ponomarev, will be in this studio and join us to explain the details. There is a scandal surrounding the Ukrainian parliament demand that anti-corruption activists declare their wealth in Ukraine, so we'll discuss that, and also the new geopolitical context in the Russian Caucasus will be explained. So you can see the full version of our interviews and the programs and the analysis of major events on our webpage en.hromadske.ua. We have a new version of it, so please follow. As well, the content is available in Russian and Ukrainian, and I'll be back in a second. Today there were more than 30 people detained in Minsk. It followed the arrest of hundreds of people. Some of them were released yesterday during so-called Freedom Day, the major protest which had taken place during the last 6 years. Those protests, there is a wave of protest. They pose the biggest challenge in years to the president Oleksandra Lukashenko. The trigger for this unrest was a tax on citizens working less than 183 days a year, locally known as a law against social parasites. So there is a lot to understand, but before we calling to Minsk to listen to the details, we'll prepare for you this report so you understand the most important issues and the most important about that.
Мы будем очень жестко следовать соблюдению законов и конституции страны. Мы никому не закрываем рот, я уже об этом говорил, но шаг влево, шаг вправо от закона будет жесточайшим образом пресекаться.
Two days after these words were spoken, more than 700 people who were taken to the streets of Belarus to protest against the social parasites tax were detained. Earlier on, the authorities had prohibited demonstrations in Minsk, and after the people came out, police started to arrest everybody in the centre. Among them were activists, journalists and ordinary passers-by.
Aren't you afraid being here? Why should I be afraid? We've lived through scary things. We are pensioners. We are not scared anymore. If they hit us, we will die. We are afraid only because they are bullying us, and they will continue to do so. You saw how people were arrested. Aren't you afraid of being arrested? For what? I wasn't stealing or something.
In the evening, police released some of those who had been arrested, but not all of them were set free. Today, people came out again in support of those who had been arrested. Police reacted quickly. According to Radio Liberty, around 32 citizens were arrested in different places.
Народ проснулся, белорусский народ проснулся, и он на этом не остановится. Пойдет дальше, он мирным путем, без всяких войн, без всяких майданов, мирным путем. Менять власть, уходить в отставку. Есть у нас люди, 9,5 миллионов, которые достойные, которые будут управлять государством или республикой. И мы верим этим людям, и мы не допустим, чтобы над нами издевались.
The international community has strongly reacted to the use of force against peaceful demonstrations. European External Action Service called the actions of the authorities a repression of freedom of expression and called for the immediate release of all peaceful citizens. Saturday's demonstration is the latest in a wave of protests since February that posed the biggest challenge in years to President Alexander Lukashenko. The trigger for the unrest was a tax on citizens working less than 183 days a year, locally known as the law against social parasites. Belarusians said the tax unfairly punished those who were unable to find work. Lukashenko has suspended the tax in light of the backlash, but the protests have continued. People demand to cancel the decree.
And we have with us a Belarusian journalist and analyst Andriy Yeliseev, who is in Minsk currently. So, Andriy, good to hear from you. I know you are following closely not what just happening in Minsk, but around the country. So, what are the major things? I think our audience followed the protest, but really what we have to know up to this hour.
Good evening. Indeed, I'm in Minsk now, and as far as you know, yesterday the protest action in Minsk took place with about 5,000 protesters, which was brutally dispersed. And today at noon in Minsk and other cities, people came to streets again, about 1,000 people in total, and again they were largely detained by the authorities. So as we see, in response to growing social protests, the Belarusian authorities started mass arrests, as they did in the aftermath of the 2010 presidential election, but this time most of people detained later freed without administrative arrests.
But do we know, so if you can compare the level or the way how police reacted during the last protest and this one, do we know about the other people who are still in custody? So, and what we expect to happen next?
Right, the protests have taken place for about 5 weeks already. So, despite most of people who were detained yesterday were later released, hundreds of people who were detained before yesterday are in custody, and tomorrow the courts will take place and review the administrative cases of those who were detained yesterday. So far, about more than 200 persons were in custody even before the yesterday mass protest in Minsk. And we also aware of further detentions of people who are considered by the authorities as those who prepared or were in intention to prepare mass riots. So we also talk about those in custody under criminal cases, not only administrative.
Andriy, and what is happening in other cities of Belarus, or do we know that is anything else apart from Minsk?
Right. Importantly, why these protests are important social phenomenon in present-day Belarus. That they indeed spread at the regional level, and many people who joined the opposition rallies in the past weeks have never taken part in similar events before. So we can see that these protests go beyond the traditional opposition electoral base in Belarus. And also, what is important, we can see that people gather through social networks, mainly through Vkontakte, a Russian analog of Facebook. So we can see that first people in the regions now started taken to the streets, and secondly, even though the opposition structures are insolvent and in many cases unable to gather people themselves gather through social networks, which is an important phenomenon
Andriy,
in today's Belarus.
Andriy, what is also we would like to understand, the previous protests, they do not happen that often in Belarus. They were more political, so there was always clear distinction between the people who are really active as a political activist and the larger society. What is the feeling about this particular protest of, the most of the people, this, usually those who remain silent, but who is a silent majority?
Right. As far as you know, the actual trigger of these protests was the decree on prevention of so-called social parasitism and the requirements of the protesters in the first protests were mostly of economic nature. To revoke this decree, and second, against the ineffective economic policies in general. But many people who took on streets also support political requirements to the authorities, and many people call for Lukashenko to resign. So these protests are not merely economic anymore, but they also have a political agenda already.
And Andriy, the last, so what is the reaction of the official Minsk and in particular of the president of Belarus, Lukashenko? He is usually very tough on protesters. And can you also put it into more geopolitical context? Because this time we know that there were kind of a softening relations with the European Union. There were a bit of a quarrel with the Russian counterpart of Lukashenko, Vladimir Putin. So there was a very interesting moment when there was a hope that Belarus can move a bit more west and get out a bit of the sphere of influence of Russia, to extent which is possible. So how it all can influence on that? Because definitely there would be tough reactions from the Brussels, from Europe. They can't remain indifferent, and how this situation could be played out by different parties in the context of the geopolitics.
So how Lukashenko and the other officials treat the protesters? There's an ongoing campaign in state media and which discredits the opponents and people who come to streets, and Lukashenko likes using the term fifth column to discredit all opponents who dare to protest. And also in the aftermath of the yesterday protests, there were a number of fake news on authorities' behalf, as far as you know, about an alleged car with weapons which tried to come to Belarus from Ukraine, or when a legitimate patriotic camp was presented as a militants camp, preparing people for mass riots and so on. So we can see that the authorities do their best to first intimidate the people to take the streets, second to discredit the opponents, and third to legitimize any disproportional measures taken by the authorities in relation to the protesters. And as for the situation in foreign policy, which Belarus finds itself, it is a really difficult situation now for Lukashenko and his team. Indeed, as you mentioned, Belarus is trying to continue its dialogue with the West, and now with the mass arrests and repressions, this dialogue will be threatened at all. And so far, Belarus has not found a solution to a complex of problems with Russia. We can see that both in foreign policy and of course, in domestic politics, Lukashenko finds himself in probably the most difficult situation ever.
Andriy, thanks a lot. That was Andriy Yeliseev, who is an analyst and journalist talking to us from Minsk. And in order to know more, I encourage you to go to our webpage and read a few analytical articles about the things to know about Belarus protest and the explanation of them. And we'll be back in a second. Former member of Russian Duma, Denis Voronenkov, was shot in the center of Ukrainian capital Kyiv this week. He was recently granted a Ukrainian citizenship and was a witness of Ukrainian ex-president witness Viktor Yanukovych court case. In 2014, the Russian Investigative Committee opened a case against Voronenkov as he was accused of the seizure of a building in Moscow worth $5 million that was not just the one story. Denis Voronenkov was married to an opera singer, a soloist of the Mariinsky Theater, Maria Maksakova. She also was a former member of parliament, but from the United Russia Party, the couple had moved to Kyiv this autumn. You can read more on Denis Voronenkov and in our article 7 facts about him, that would give more background to understand that this story is way bigger. We also know that Voronenkov's murder had been identified as a 20-year-old man. He had been shot by the guard of Voronenkov during this sad event. The name of the killer is Pavel Parshov, and according to the information by Anton Gerashchenko, who is an advisor to Ukrainian Interior Minister, he had been also the representative of the National Guard of Ukraine for 13 months, though he left it before. So there is a lot to discuss because this is a major killing in the center of Ukrainian capital. And to explain more, to understand it, we have Ilya Ponomarev, also a former Russian member of parliament who lives here in exile already for a couple of years, though Ilya is an opposition member of parliament. And to mention important that was the meeting with you where Denis had been going. So there were a lot in the media. This is a very difficult days probably for you. But really what we need to understand at this moment about this murder.
Well, firstly, there are a lot of speculations about who Denis Voronenkov was. And I want to clarify that. Denis Voronenkov was a very high-profile investigator in Russia who was at one time in charge of anti-smuggling activities in the country, working for a state agency against drug trafficking. And being in that position, he disclosed a major network of smuggling, including drugs smuggling and conventional smuggling, which involved virtually all leadership of economic department of Federal Security Service, so KGB. And he actually managed to get 29 top-ranking generals from FSB to be fired. And that's the beginning of his, so to say, oppositional career in Russia, because of course that alienated a lot of acting officers of FSB. And most importantly, one of the currently mostly influential general in Russia, General Oleg Feoktistov, the chief of internal security of FSB. What internal security means that this is the guy who is responsible for counterintelligence inside FSB. So this is the guy who can, for example, tap without court order a phone of a chairman of FSB. And he has the right of directly reporting to Vladimir Putin. So he's one of the most influential security officers in Russia. And that was the personal enemy of Denis Voronenkov. At one point of time, around 10 years ago. Voronenkov already survived an assassination attempt in the center of Moscow, and he was shot also, but he survived. He was treated in a military hospital in France, in NATO, and at the time, somebody from the very top, and some people say that it was Vladimir Putin personally, ordered so that no more hostilities. Guys, stop fighting with each other. Denis, we are no longer investigating the corruption in FSB, but guys from FSB, stop from trying to eliminate Denis. And that was a kind of flipping the page. Denis for a while went into business, but then when he started to feel that it was not forgotten, he decided to get elected in the Duma, successfully campaigned, and in 2011 he got elected in State Duma. In State Duma, 3 times, the same group of people led by Oleg Feoktistov tried to put him in prison for this alleged case with the machinations with the building in the center of Moscow. Also for you to understand that the whole case is based on the testimony of one single guy who is kept in prison for several years in a row already. So there are no other pieces of evidence there. So I take this case as a totally fraudulent case.
But Ilya, since you already raised that issue, of course, it's very difficult at the moment to speak, very critical on somebody who had passed away, because it's anyway the tragedy as a person had been assassinated. But we would like to provide you this, for those who hadn't been following, a few quotes from Novaya Gazeta, who had done an investigation of Denis Voronenkov after he had left Russia for Ukraine, with some of the particular also accusations, which we probably can't figure out now, but please listen.
All of Voronenkov's acquaintances in Russia who we interviewed are sure that the former MP has fled the country, because he himself has had to appear in court. For the last 10 years, Voronenkov's name has been mentioned in several high-profile cases. However, every time the MP has miraculously managed to get out of trouble. The reason for this luck, according to Voronenkov's acquaintances, can be explained by the strength of his connections among security officials and high-ranking officials, as well as the deterioration of the Russian intelligence agencies and the system for selecting personnel. The FSB has accumulated a lot of material on Voronenkov, but every time nothing has come of it due to political reasons. In one case, the names of the assistants to the heads of the State Duma, for whom he was carrying out informal tasks, would have been made public. In another case, the system of illegally financing elections would have been made public, and the 2011 elections would have had to be cancelled. It was later revealed that all information from Voronenkov was empty. He was simply mimicking the investigations of those close to him and the people he trusted. In some cases, it even turned out that he had told these people they were allegedly under deep investigation and offered to help them solve their problems. That is, not only did he not carry out any real useful work, he also managed to extract some personal benefit from this.
This is a very lengthy investigation. You can read way more details and testimonies.
Natalia, I like Novaya Gazeta. I'm good friends of editor-in-chief of Novaya Gazeta. It's one of the remaining liberal outposts in Russia. But this article is a piece of shame. It totally violates journalist ethics. It was published exactly in the same day when the scandal erupted. So it's just impossible to make an investigation in several hours and publish an article which is several pages long. It's a press release from FSB. And neither Voronenkov nor anybody else was given a chance to reply to that article and to say anything within. So it's a total violation of journalist ethics. I understand that Novaya Gazeta, being very active investigation, having a very active investigation unit, they have to cooperate with Russian security to be able to get information, and they treated like Voronenkov already as a cut piece, and so that was their compromise. But this article is a pure lie.
I just have to answer that we know personally the journalists who had written that and have some kind of respect to their previous job,
this article is
as well
a lie,
as
and
knew
I am
that
ready to say it to him in face. I already wrote it.
Yeah,
to him.
as I knew they tried to reach Voronenkov, and at the time he
That's
appeared.
not true.
But of course, there is something we have to present to our audience. You said there was another important thing. You said that the Denis was valuable to Ukraine. He knew a lot and about the financial contributions for the Putin administration. So do you think what he hadn't said? Because, of course, in Ukraine there is a popular idea he was the witness on the Yanukovych trial, but we clearly know there are a lot of people, more than him, who could give a testimony on former Ukrainian president.
Yeah, it was very useful that he was here and that he testified on Yanukovych case. But basically, he didn't need to have any insider's knowledge on Yanukovych case, because Yanukovych case is extremely simple. It's about saying, yes, there was a letter. The letter was presented in the Russian parliament. Yes, we saw that it was presented. It's written in the official documents of State Duma, and this affected the voting process of Russian senators when they agreed for military intervention in Ukraine. So basically, you don't need anything else, and that's what Denis basically said, and that's the same what I said in my own testimony on the same case. Denis's value was in the knowledge of financial misdeeds of high-ranking Russian security generals. And as you perfectly know, the whole war in eastern Ukraine is being financed through smuggling activities. So he could have disclosed the particular banks, the particular transactions, the particular people who were responsible for those transactions. And I think that he was sentenced with dual purpose. Firstly, to show to others in Russia, to Russian elite, it was an act of state terror, as President Poroshenko correctly said, but an act of state terror not for Ukrainians, but act of state terror for Russians. You know, that you shouldn't switch sides, that you shouldn't go to Ukraine, that you shouldn't help them. And secondly, of course, to keep him silent, not to put a light of information about where the money that are financing the war is coming from.
So I'd like to follow with the tweet of the Moscow Times managing editor Oliver Carroll, a British journalist based in Moscow, not to ever expanding army of Western Russian experts. Voronenkov was less a Putin critic as a Putin betrayer. There is a difference.
Here I totally agree, and I always was saying, Voronenkov is not an angel. Voronenkov was a typical representative of Russian security forces. And their position, they say, we are uniformed people, so we are following orders. All this politics about the annexation of Crimea, war and peace, at the end of the day, that's not our question. We are being told to vote yes, yes, we will vote yes. If we will be told to vote no, yes, we will vote no. But what we know about, where we are professionals, yes, that's our job, that's our professional pride, that's our professional honor, and that's about these financial investigations.
And he was going to meet you at that sad morning. Were there anything particular you were going to discuss?
We were discussing a very simple thing. Russia was going to demand a red notice for Denis Voronenkov through Interpol. And I helped him to file all the papers for Interpol as a preemptive measure to avoid issuing of this red notice. I myself passed the same procedure. 10 of my political aides have political asylums in different countries and also experienced Interpol requests. So we like sharing the experience, and that's also because I know very well the substance of the accusations against Voronenkov. Because to prepare the letter, I had to flip through all the criminal cases opened against him in the past, in the present, see through all the materials, and helped his lawyers to properly put the filing.
The Ukrainian Member of Parliament, Mustafa Najem, has said that Voronenkov's assassination exposes weakness of Ukraine's law enforcement. And of course, there was the huge discussion here in Ukraine is that they failed to protect them. There is a high-level witness, and the Ukrainian State Service had to do more. And of course, that's what everybody discussed here in Kyiv. But what do you say? Do you think that it's, like if the Kremlin wants to get rid of somebody, it doesn't matter. They kill the people in London.
Well, firstly, as we see, for example, Alexander Litvinenko in Great Britain, he was protected by MI6 and he was assassinated. Boris Berezovsky, the same protection, he was assassinated and with the best private security service money can buy. In United States, Mikhail Lesin, also a defector from Russia, was assassinated in the center of Washington, D.C., being protected by FBI. So the best security services in the world, if professionals want to eliminate somebody, usually are not able to do something. Yeah, you can put a person on a military base, put security guards, and maybe in this case he will be safe. But we are public people, myself, Denis, others. So we don't want to live this life. We want to be able and capable to come to you and to talk to you about the recent events. And in this situation, it always can happen. No, I think the failure that Mustafa is talking about is a different thing. The failure was in actually recognizing the value of Denis Voronenkov, because, as I said, the value was not in Yanukovych's case. And the failure to give an order to properly protect him, because all the politicians, because of such articles as you just cited from Novaya Gazeta and the wave of dirty disinformation that was raised by Alexei Navalny, one of Russian political activists against Denis Voronenko, actually prevented Ukrainian politicians to come closer to him. They thought that Voronenko may turn to be a toxic asset for themselves. So from one side, they say, okay, if he will receive his citizenship, but through a conventional procedure, not through a presidential decree, he will manage to do it by himself, that's okay, we will not prevent it. But the security that was assisting Denis, protecting him, there was military people, and they were acting on just military orders and not by legal enforcement procedures, as, for example, I am protected right now by SBU.
Ilya, so I knew that you had been asked a few times this question after this assassination. So you here, how do you feel? Are you afraid? Are you more concerned? How all kind of the things. You're another former Russian MP.
When Denis was deciding to move to Ukraine, and our first talk about this was in September 2016, and we were sitting in the cafe in the center of Kyiv, and so he was asking me, so how it would be here, and will he be able to integrate in the Ukrainian society? And I said, it's a wonderful place, it's a great city, I feel like that's the best period of my life, but you should also understand that you are buying a ticket to war. And it is a full-fledged war where there are shots and where there are victims. And he said that he understands this and he wants to go for this war because he wants to publish Russian corrupt generals. He wants to change his country and he wants to serve this new country for him to become.
Thanks on that. Of course, I should explain to our audience that, of course, there is a lot to read about Denis Voronenkov. He was not an easy figure, not a clear and opposition member of parliament, but somebody who had some background and the cooperation with the former Russian authorities. Before we go to the protests in Russia, which we will discuss with Ilya later, I propose you to watch a short clip from the interview with Denis Voronenkov, which the Hromadske had done a month ago here at these premises. So please watch, and a longer version is available on our webpage.
In your first interview, you said that you gave evidence to the prosecution regarding Yanukovych's treason. How did you know that?
Listen, it came from somewhere. I had specific knowledge of this area. мне, по крайней мере, в разговоре вы говорили, что...
You said that you feel a certain danger being here.
В некоторой опасности.
Is that so?
Это так?
What is that in relation to?
Все мы не глупые люди, мы понимаем. И посмотрите...
We're not stupid. We understand what's going on. You see, right now, sparks are flying into Russian media. They're dragging me through the mud, thinking up ways to make me seem like a bad guy. It means I've become important to them. I've gotten under their skin. At the moment, the government is sacred in Russia. No one has the right to criticize it. I've spoken out on everything. I say it like it is. And I assure you, there is a large number of conscious people out there who think the same. But they are afraid. Why are they afraid? I explain this in my article. It's because of all grown men in Russia between the ages of 21 and 60 who have been through the prison system. They're everyone in there. And for those who haven't been yet, they can always find a way. It was the same when I apparently organised the theft of certain buildings with people who I'd never met in my life. I'd never seen them. I didn't know them at all. I don't know who these people are. You know, the funniest thing is, when they showed these people the photograph, they said that they knew me.
But why are they trying to get rid of you?
It all took place in secret until 2013. I knew they were fabricating a case on me. But officially, they always said that I had no such claim. In 2013, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation started putting me forward for an auditor position at the accounts chamber. It was quite a high-ranking position, the level of minister. And they needed to bring me down. In whatever position, I was enemy. They said I was a criminal. And that's when the first articles appeared in the press.
Let's go back to the events of 2014. Who from the highest ranks, the State Duma deputies, were not publicly opposed to the annexation of Crimea?
A huge number of people. I once talked to Ilya Ponomarev. We estimated that 40 people would vote against. He said that he found himself alone and got scared. Of course, he was strongly opposed to the government, and he talked about it openly. He defended his position till the end, and many others realized how painful it would be for them if they did the same. 15 minutes of fame for 10,000 years' dishonor. I was told directly, you're 50 meters away from the State Duma. Nothing will save you. Considering the problems I've been charged with in 2013, I weighed everything up and decided my vote. If I say what I think, what do I get? I'd end up losing my family. They wouldn't shy away from doing that. I understand the methods of this government. It doesn't even compare to the methods the NKVD used and those that Stalin used as well. It's the combination of scum and worthlessness that destroys and crushes everything.
You've already said that you yourself did not vote.
Of course, I avoided it. It goes without saying. It was weak of me. I understand that it was a mistake the government made that created serious problems for the country. It was at that moment I decided I didn't want to live like that I would go to Ukraine. Above all else, it's a way of life. We are hostages. Where do we live?
We know about at least 30 people detained in the center of Moscow. This is the confirmed figures by Info, but heard about the hundreds of people detained and arrested in Moscow and other cities. These are the also major protests taking place right away, right now, not just in the Russian capital. One of the demands of the protesters is an investigation into Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev's alleged involvement in corruption schemes. Police have detained participants, including Alexei Navalny, who is a politician, opposition politician, and we know that we'll discuss this situation, of course, because we didn't expect, Ilya, what we know, we didn't expect yesterday still that there would be protests all over the country and they would last that long.
You see, I told you that Maidan in Russia is possible, and you never believe me.
Do you compare that with, I mean, really, how do you, you're following from Kyiv, but still.
It's just the beginning. We have a huge country. The protests were in 100 cities, which I especially glad that the biggest protest was not in Moscow. It was in St. Pete. And they were literally everywhere. That means that it's no longer Bolotnaya Square, that the country is not sleeping. The country is just waiting for the proper slogan, the proper idea to unite around. And of course, corruption is one of such potential ideas.
But look, as we followed before, the people would be detained, some of them would be in custody, some would be freed. But what next? What is the, the logic and the tactic of the Russian opposition, of people like you?
I think that to change the situation at the end of the day, you need an organized political force. It's a systematic fight. It's not a one-time job. And right now, I take these protests as an indicator that the passion is there, that the desire of people for the change is there. They are not happy with the way they're living. But so far, they just haven't found this idea, this organization. And I really hope that Alexei Navalny, who is doing it for his presidential campaign, would not just use it for presidential campaign and stop it there.
Do you think about any kind of a cooperation? Because always the weakest point of the opposition in Ukraine, in Belarus, or in Russia, that it's not united and then it's fragmented, and that's what the regime always uses.
I totally agree. It's the biggest problem, and in Russia especially. But the problem of this disunity of the opposition is the lack of unifying idea. That's why I'm talking about this. People should not around leaders, but around ideas. And as soon as this idea would emerge, the whole situation in the country would change overnight.
This is a question of the people and of the Kremlin, that what is this idea? The idea to get rid of us and, substitute with another people, that's not it's kind of a destructive idea, and that's why some people don't support it.
And I agree here, because, I don't understand how the power led by, say, Navalny would be better than power that is led by Putin. I don't see much of a difference between their slogans. And just the idea of renovation, that's something that people in the remote Russian places totally reject, because they don't want to wind up in the situation like in the 90s. And that's why the example of Ukraine is so important for Russians, because they say, okay, so you changed one with another, and what's the difference? It's the situation is changing only for worse and not for the better. People want to have guarantees that we will have a different society after the change, after the revolution. And that's why they are asking for an idea. And I guarantee that in the very near future, maybe a year from now, this idea will emerge, and then the situation will start to change.
And shortly, we also know that the state Russian TV channels didn't show anything of the protest. There were some series or the documentaries on the major Russian...
Nobody have comments, we joke, yeah.
But really, for the situation to follow up. So what would be the, the signs of you? What would be the things you will follow next week in Russia? You're here, you're taking care, you're worried about your country. So what would be these signs to look if this particular protest would develop into something bigger?
I will connect to my friends in Russian regions. I don't believe that right now Moscow is the main revolutionary force, despite that it's the most liberal place probably in the country. I will track the situation in my home city of Novosibirsk, which I think is probably the opposition capital of Russia right now, and in the city of Yekaterinburg, where, as I heard, there was the largest rally among all Russian regions besides Moscow and St. Pete.
Okay, Ilya, thanks a lot for elaborating also on that, and we'll have a closer look, and we'll be back in a second. And Today we have the election in the breakaway region of Georgia, Abkhazia. The new parliament is going to be very heterogeneous. But you can read more details on that on our webpage, en.hromadske.ua. It had been provided by our partners, Jam News, working on the ground. The supporters of candidates are using dirty tricks. We know the major opposition leader, Oleksandra, is a former also a politician from Abkhazia. Yet it's very interesting to follow, because we also know that in 2 weeks there would be the referendum is in another breakaway region of Georgia, South Ossetia, referendum about joining Russia. About that, we talked to the prominent Russian journalist and editor-in-chief of the Russian Note, Gregory Shvedov, who also explained us way more things about the role of the Chechen fighters who are the members of the Russian National Guard in Syria, about the relations between Ramzan Kadyrov and Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia and the president of the Russian Republic of Chechnya, and as well the details on how the Chechens are coming back to the Caucasus from the territories controlled by the ISIS. And we'll be back after the interview. We recently would have the elections in South Ossetia, in a breakaway region of Georgia, where also there might be the referendum for joining and becoming the part of Russia.
True, it is what is going on, and the most interesting process is that one of the candidates, which is currently not registered to be a candidate to the position of president, a former president of so-called South Ossetia, is criticizing Kremlin openly, criticizing military bases on the territory of South Ossetia, and having quite substantial public support. So there are peaceful demonstrations which are going on in the region, and it is clearly ironic that they are led by one of those who have been destroying the roots of democracy in this region. But it is very interesting and important to look into this situation, because we already saw how many years ago in other breakaway region in Abkhazia, people of this territory have been able to elect not a candidate of Moscow, but someone else alternative. Since it's a very small community, since relative relationships are important, many things might happen there.
Gregory, at this stage, what do we know about the participation of the Chechen battalions, of the Chechen fighters who are the soldiers of the Russian army or Russian Guard in Syria, in particular in Aleppo and, but not just there?
We do know that there is so-called military police there. We do know from the region itself that they've been expected to get back, to be sent back home already in January, but that never happened. We do know that another relative nation, they are part of Vainache nation, both Ingush and Chechens. So now Ingush battalion was sent to Syria to support Chechens there. We do not know exactly what are they doing there, but at least the purpose of military police is quite clear. They are supposed to guard military main military stations we do have in Syria. So it's mostly Latakia, I guess.
But we hear about this creation of this center for the training of the special forces in Chechnya, and really there is this notion of the people fighting for Kadyrov. Kadyrov says there is this term, but really, who are these people? Whom are they loyal? I mean, they are the part of the Russian Guard, but really, what this force is?
I think this is a special force which is mainly loyal to Kadyrov, but it's clear that on demand they might be requested for any special operations in any parts of Russia. We are in the election year already, And if something is expected in some of our Russian regions, some kind of protests, these people would be definitely the best to attack protesters, and I think those people would be ready to do whatever would be requested by Moscow as well.
How many of them? The full version of the interview with Gregory Shvedov with more details, please watch on our webpage, and we'll go to another topic. The Ukrainian lawmakers had voted to demand that anti-corruption non-governmental organization and investigative journalists should publish their assets and declaration online. The initiative has come from a former anti-corruption activist and current member of Narodny Front party. This is the second biggest party, Tatiana Chornovol. Yet numerous sources have confirmed that this, here you can see Tatiana, but numerous sources have confirmed to Hromadske that this project is supported by the presidential administration and some of the key politicians in the country. That is not the just initiative of a one personality. And we have in our studio Oleksandra Drik, who is the head of the Civic Lustration Committee and the member of the Public Council under the National Agency of the Corruption Prevention. So Oleksandra, really explain why it's serious, what we have to know about that.
Well, it's very serious. First of all, it's a huge attack on anti-corruption NGOs and civil society in general, and also independent journalists, investigative journalists in the first instance, because it not only obliges them to publish electronic declarations, but it creates conditions under which they can be chased by law enforcement and by politically controlled national agency on prevention of corruption. So it creates conditions under which we can basically be chased for doing what? For fighting against corruption and for demanding them to show their assets, because it was exactly the civil society who was demanding and who was fighting for the launch of the e-declaration system, and now they're fighting back. And second thing, using this scandal, understanding that we will be protecting ourselves, that we will not let this happen, they actually introduced some amendments to the law on prevention of corruption that creates new corruption risks. Basically, no, it was not mentioned. Nobody, I don't remember anybody mentioning it. That they actually amended some of the key provisions that we were working on in the initial legislation, meaning the initial presidential legislation. That would create conditions under which certain military will not be obliged by the law on prevention of corruption either to publish their declarations or fall under any other provisions of the legislation. I think it's important to explain where this draft law came from, what was the initial idea, and how we ended up in this situation. First of all, it was the presidential draft law that was to solve a problem with military declaring assets while they are in ATO zone. That was the initial idea. However, the initial presidential draft law contained a lot of corruption risks. So we spent 1 week trying to get rid of all those corruption risks in the presidential draft law. And with the working group that was created under the Anti-Corruption Parliamentary Committee, with the participation of the representative of the president in the parliament, we created a draft law that was okay. It was solving the problem with the military, the junior level military, who is in the ATO zone and who cannot declare because of that. And it was not creating any new corruption risks. When the draft law was voted in the parliament, they included, and it only included, it had, the draft law that we worked on had 5 amendments to the law. That's it. But during the voting and before the voting, 49 other amendments were submitted to the parliament.
Oleksandra, we see the issues with the way how it had proceeded, but what matters is also the public opinion in Ukraine matters. That's how a lot of things are played out. And there is this sentiment, I mean, I can quote the MP Tatiana Chernavol, for instance, how she explains. An honest anti-corruption activist, honest journalist, honest community board council at governmental entity shouldn't have problems with filling in the declaration. In return, this person should be proud of themselves because she will follow the main rule of anti-corruption transparency. Another media lawyer, Roman Holovenko, had said, we can also show that post on Facebook. I don't see anything bad if the editors, management declare their wealth. The risk of pressure on them after publishing the information from declaration can't be compared to the real pressure of the media owners who finance them. And finally, we haven't overcome paid journalism. So as you see, this is a popular, I've read a lot of people who are kind of definitely not, paid by somebody. They just thought like, why not? What is the problem with that?
There is certainly no problem with
if you are an anti-corruption person, activist, please publish. What's wrong?
There is no problem at all with publishing declarations, provided that it is required without the violation of the constitution, in a matter that corresponds with the existing legislation, with guarantees that we will not be chased, and provided that we are not equaled to the state officials. What's the problem with this particular norms adopted by the parliament? They are violating constitution. Second, they are discriminating. What is the difference between anti-corruption NGO and NGO, for instance, that controls and monitors the reform of the judiciary or the state reform? What is the difference between these NGOs? Second, why are we supposed to submit these declarations and be subject to criminal liability as the state officials, just like the state officials? Are we receiving public money? No, it's us who are paying the taxes and who requires the state officials to explain whether they live on their salary or whether they are involved in corruption.
So there was a huge condemnation of this law. The Commissioner for European Neighbourhood Policy and Enlargement, Johannes Hahn, has written the following: civil society organizations fighting corruption play a crucial role in this regard. E-declarations should target corruption in public administration, not hamper work of civil society. Changes to the law on e-declaration are a step back, not forward, and should be reconsidered. We have a tweet from the UK ambassador to Ukraine. While I'm a bit too fast with that, so what she says, changes to e-declaration law is a serious step back, could limit NGO capacity, expose them to pressure and affect reforms, needs urgent review. As well, we have the Canadian ambassador who really also says that it's the biggest question about the rule of law in Ukraine are the assets of anti-corruption activists at the expense of grants. You're on the edge. This is, the government could say there's a pressure from the Western governments, but really, can it influence on something? Can you explain to what can be changed? Do the president still can do something? Can we roll back? And also shortly explain. So there was the initiative to have there the journalists and the editors, but now it's just the anti-corruption activist.
Yes, Chernavol, the author of the amendments, actually said during this in the session hall, she said that she will exclude the media from that, journalists from that law, but then she added, because this will be in a different law. So you can expect that to come also. What's the problem and how this can be fixed? The problem is that it does limit the capacity of NGOs working working in the field, because it obliges every single person who is working with an NGO to submit a declaration. That will require to submit a declarations everybody who is the third person receiving the money from any technical support coming from international donors.
Can you just really explain what could be done, what we should follow? We have to finish this discussion. So what can be followed, what the president could do that this law isn't enforced?
The president can veto the law, and that's what he has to do, because it violates the Constitution. Yes. Tomorrow he will be meeting the ambassadors of the G7, and they are all well aware of the situation, and you have read some of the quotations from them, and they will be raising this question, and it's something that president should do tomorrow. He should veto the law, then he has to address the parliament, call for the extraordinary meeting of the parliament, and propose the amendments that were created by the working group. Then the problem is solved. We don't have to again come back to this issue.
Oleksandra, thanks a lot. That was Oleksandra Drik, who is the head of the Civil Lustration Committee, the member of the Public Council under the National Agency of the Corruption Prevention in Ukraine. That was the Sunday show, extremely active. There is a lot to tell. We are following 24/7 what's happening in Russia, in Belarus, in the region and in Ukraine. So please go to our webpage. We are there. Go to our social networks. And I'm saying you goodbye.
Ми готуємось залишити Алеппо.
Куди йти? До Канади? Я не знаю, можливо, нам треба втекти на іншу планету. Нам потрібна порожня планета.
Вихідних у нас немає. Ми працюємо весь тиждень.